The echelon spire did not fly. It reigned. It hung suspended in the high stratosphere of Thalassa Prime, a silver-blue gas giant whose clouds churned 10,000 kilometers below. The spire was a city of impossible towers and delicate buttresses, a monument of the Aurelian Empire that defied gravity, not with the brute force of rockets, but with the ancient, whispering elegance of the Aegis array. This technology, a relic of ancestors who operated on the fringes of known physics, sang a song of resonance that coaxed the planet's immense gravitational field into holding the palace aloft. For centuries, the song had been flawless. Now, it was developing a tremor. Rhett Calder felt it in his teeth. He was kneeling on a vibrating access grill, his coveralls stained with synthetic lubrication, tightening a coolant feed. Around him, the internal architecture of the spire was a cathedral of ivory-pale composites and glowing energy conduits. He was, according to his work manifest, a third-class orbital mechanic, a general, fix-it man, hired by the Aurelian Ministry of Architecture to handle the mundane tasks the high-born Aurelian engineers found beneath them. Rhett preferred it that way. He kept his head down, his tools clean, and his jokes quiet. The role of simple tinkerer was comfortable armor. It hid the man who had once been a resident architect, a graduate of a top-secret human program dedicated to the very science that held this palace in the sky. It hid the scar tissue that lined his memory, the ghosts of a team betrayed and sacrificed by the Helion Directorate. The Directorate preferred to eliminate those who understood resonance, so Rhett Calder had ceased to exist, replaced by a man who just fixed leaky pipes. The shudder came again, a low-frequency vibration that rattled his wrench against the bolt. It was a harmonic mismatch, a discordant note in the array's great song. The locals were getting nervous. The local in charge was Empress Seraphine Kaida. She was the absolute ruler of the Aurelian Empire, and she was, according to rumor, dangerously unstable. Her people, the Aureli, were tall, slender beings of unnerving grace, but Seraphine possessed a unique trait. Beneath her skin, a lattice of light pulsed and shifted. It was a biograph, a biological map of her emotional state, visible to all, delicate. Golden patterns meant calm, sharp. Crimson flickers meant rage. Rumors claimed her biography was a storm of unpredictable color. The truth was simpler. Seraphine was a ruler besieged by internal politics and external threats. And her volatility was a calculated shield. It was exhausting armor to wear. And the constant, subtle vibration of her entire world was not helping. The instability of the Aegis array was the worst-kept secret in the Empire. The complex, ancient machine was failing. The tremors were growing more frequent. The Aurelian engineers, for all their pride, viewed the array as a holy relic, a machine built by their ancestors that must not be touched, only maintained. They polished its chassis but refused to look inside. They feared it, desperate. The Ministry of Architecture had quietly sought an off-worlder, a technician from a species known for its reckless disregard for holy warnings. They needed someone who just saw a machine. They hired Rhett Calder. His first formal duty was not in the engine room, but at a diplomatic reception. The grand concourse of the spire was an ocean of polished marble under a crystalline ceiling that looked directly out onto the silver-blue limb of Thalassa Prime. Aurelian nobles drifted through the hall, their biographs pulsing with polite, muted shades of turquoise and lavender. Rhett stood near a service alcove, holding a bulb of nutrient solution he had no intention of drinking. He looked terribly human, shorter than the Aureli, more solid, his face lacking the luminous biology of the court. He became the center of attention when High Lord Kaelor Draith approached. Kaelor was the leader of the Purist Watch, a xenophobic faction that believed Aurelian supremacy was absolute. His biography was a flat, cold white, showing nothing. He stopped before Rhett, his gaze dismissive. "This is the Ministry's solution." Kaelor's voice was loud, carrying across the sudden hush of the hall. "A primate technician, we are trusting the legacy of our ancestors, the very foundation of our home, to a short-lived creature from a mud ball." Rhett looked up from his drink, his expression mild. He met the High Lord's gaze and offered a small, disarming smile. "High Lord," Rhett said, his voice calm and clear in the silence. "We primates have a long and storied history of finding the loose bolt. We are, after all, experts at throwing things until the rattling stops." The concourse went utterly, terrifyingly silent. The assembled nobles froze, their biographs flickering with shock. Insulting a High Lord, even with a joke, was unthinkable. Kaelor's face tightened, his non-existent biography somehow feeling colder. And then, from the high dais, came a sound no one had heard in months. Empress Seraphine Kaida laughed. It was not a polite titter. It was a sharp, genuine bark of amusement. Her biography, which had been a guarded shade of deep violet, suddenly flared with spikes of bright, glittering gold. She covered her mouth a moment later, composing herself, but the damage was done. The tension shattered. Rhett Calder simply nodded politely to the fuming High Lord and took a sip of his drink. He had made an enemy and, apparently, intrigued an Empress. The test of his skills came sooner than he expected. It happened 3 days later. He was in a diagnostic substation, monitoring the energy feeds from the southeast wing, when the deck beneath him did not just shudder. It dropped. An alarm blared, a high-pitched alien keen. The dip was only for a microsecond, but in a structure held aloft by resonance. It was catastrophic. Rhett was thrown against the console, but his mind was already working. He ignored the flashing lights and focused on the feel of the machinery around him. The harmony was gone, replaced by a screaming void. A primary resonance field had collapsed. He sprinted from the station into a wide observation corridor. Below him, through the thick transparency of the floor, the southeast hanging terrace, a garden open to the sky, was visibly tilting. A group of ladies-in-waiting, caught enjoying the view, were screaming as they slid across the polished deck toward the outer railing, a barrier that now separated them from a 10,000-kilometer fall into the gas giant's atmosphere. "The anchors are offline," an Aurelian guard yelled, fumbling with a comm panel. Rhett did not run toward the terrace. He ran to a junction box on the corridor wall, a simple gray panel marked with Aurelian script. He slammed his palm against it. But it was not an act of violence. He closed his eyes, filtering alarms, screams, and dizziness. He found it. The subharmonic. The ancillary field that was trying to compensate but was out of phase. He pushed his own innate, terrifyingly secret talent into the machine. He was no mechanic. He was a resonant architect. He did not fix the machine. He spoke to it. He found the frequency, grabbed it with his mind, and locked it. The sickening lurch stopped. The terrace stabilized with a groan of stressed metal, halting its terrifying tilt. The ladies-in-waiting lay in a heap, safe, yards from the edge. Rhett pulled his hand back from the panel as if it were burned. He was breathing heavily, the ghosts of his old life swirling around him. He turned. Empress Seraphine Kaida was standing 10 feet away, flanked by 2 of her royal guards. She had not screamed. She had watched. She had seen his hand on the panel, seen the stabilization of the terrace, and seen the look of intense, impossible concentration on his face. "That," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, Her biography, a tight, analytical sapphire, was not the action of a fix-it man. Rhett wiped his palm on his coveralls, forcing a casual shrug. Lucky guess, Your Majesty. Sometimes you just have to hit the console. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. You did not hit it, Master Calder. You held it, as if you were listening. She had noticed something else, too. In the chaotic moments of the crisis, as her guards had braced for impact, Rhett Calder had not flinched. He had not bowed. He had not once looked at her with the terror or awe she demanded as Empress. He had looked at her like a person who was busy. This, she found, was far more interesting than the near disaster. She summoned him later that day, not to the throne room, but to a small, pressurized observation lounge near the site of the incident. It was cold. The localized failure had disrupted the climate controls, and the ambient temperature was dropping. Rhett stood at ease, waiting. Seraphine entered alone, dismissing her guards. She was studying him, her analytical sapphire biography pulsing slowly. The lounge was circular, with a single curved bench facing the window. She sat, gesturing for him to join her, though not to sit. The ministry report says you manually realigned the tertiary resonance lock, she said. That's a very generous term for what I did, Your Majesty. I just rerouted the power flow. Rhett kept his voice light, the mechanic's persona firmly in place. The engineers I spoke to, she continued, ignoring his deflection, said that what you did was theoretically impossible, that it would require an intuitive understanding of the Aegis, an understanding none of them possess. I get lucky a lot. Seraphine looked away from him, out at the endless expanse of silver-blue clouds. The silence stretched. The room was genuinely cold now. Rhett could see his breath fog. She absently rubbed her arms, a very human gesture. Her biography flickered with a brief, pale lavender of discomfort. She looked at him, then at the empty space beside her on the bench. Then she did something that defied all Aurelian protocol. She slid over, making room. Sit. Master Calder, you are shivering. Rhett hesitated just a second before sitting. The bench was made of some polished, cold material. He was still several feet from her. She studied him again, her gaze sharp. You are not afraid of me. Should I be? Rhett asked. Everyone is. It is the proper response. My apologies. I'll work on that. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. The sapphire of her biography softened. She fell silent again, but the cold was persistent. Rhett, trying to remain respectful, kept himself rigid, trying not to react to the chill. Seraphine, however, seemed to be processing a new set of data. She watched his tremors, his shoulders tense. Then, with the analytical curiosity of a scientist examining a new specimen, she shifted on the bench. She moved until her shoulder and upper arm were pressed firmly against his. Rhett went completely still. The contact was electric, bizarre. He could feel the faint, alien warmth of her through his uniform and her formal robes. She was impossibly close, well inside any definition of personal space. He could smell the faint ozone and jasmine scent of her. He turned his head slowly. She was looking straight ahead, at the window. Her biography was a pale, questioning blue. She was clearly confused by the sensation. After a long moment, she turned her head, her face only inches from his. She spoke in a whisper, her tone not seductive, but genuinely perplexed, as if she had just made a strange discovery. Is this how humans share heat? Rhett stared at her. He saw the genuine innocence in the question. This was the most powerful being in the system, a woman rumored to be a tyrant, and she was asking a question about basic biology with the simplicity of a child. The tension of the last few days, the fear of discovery, the weight of his past, it all paused. His instinct for wry humor, the shield that had kept him alive, took over. A slow smile spread across his face. "It's one of the more basic models, Your Majesty," he whispered back, his voice warm. "We usually save the advanced techniques for the second diagnostic." Her biography flared. It was not the gold of laughter this time, but a swirling pattern of deep rose and baffled azure. She did not pull away. She just stared at him, processing this new, strange data. The ice between them had not just broken, it had melted. The moment was interrupted by the chime of the door. An aide entered, bowing low, his biography flashing a frantic yellow of panic. "Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion. The council must convene. We have received a priority message." Seraphine pulled away from Rhett, the Empress mask snapping back into place. The warmth was gone. She stood, her biography settling into a hard, cold violet. "What is it?" "It is the Helion Directorate, Your Majesty. They have initiated a full energy embargo. They claim Aurelian stability is a sector-wide threat." The aide held a data slate. "They are demanding we sign the Treaty of Dependency, or they will let the spire fall." Seraph, CS, response Saibao. Finalin's gaze went to the window, to the vast emptiness below. Her throne was failing from within, and now her oldest enemy was at the gates. She turned her head, her eyes finding Rhett Calder. He was no longer smiling. His face was a mask of cold, hard focus. The mechanic was gone. Seraphine was facing the ruin of her empire. Rhett Calder was facing the ghosts that had murdered his team. And the spire, indifferent to them both, continued its long, slow fall from grace. The embargo was a blade pressed to the Echelon Spire's throat. The Helion Directorate had cut off 90% of the refined energy imports that powered the palace's non-essential systems. It was a cold, political act of strangulation designed to force Seraphine's hand. It also had an unintended side effect. It gave Rhett Calder leverage. With the Directorate's boot on their neck, the Aurelian Council could no longer afford pride. The stability of the Aegis array was no longer a matter of prestige. It was survival. The High Lord Kalor Draith had argued furiously against it, but the Empress had overruled him. Rhett was granted full, unrestricted access to the heart of the array. The core resonance chamber was not a room of engines and plasma. It was a cathedral of silence. It was a vast, spherical space, located at the precise gravitational center of the spire. The machine itself was a colossal, slowly rotating crystal lattice suspended in a vacuum, pulsing, with a light so low and deep it was felt more than seen. It sang. The song was the complex, layered harmony that kept 10 million tons of Pallas from becoming a 10 million-ton meteor. Rhett stood on a narrow observation gantry, his diagnostic kit open. He was not looking at the readings. He was listening. He had spent the last 24 hours mapping the harmonics. The tremors did not decay. Decay was a slow, predictable fade, like a note gently losing volume. This was different. This was noise. He found the first one in the Alpha Quadrant matrix, the main load-bearing field. It was a resonance fracture. It was not a physical break, but a hairline crack in the idea of the machine. A persistent, discordant frequency had been injected into the harmony. Tiny, but relentless. It was designed to grate against the primary field, causing interference, vibration, and, eventually, catastrophic failure. It was not old. It was new. And it was deliberate. "Sabotage," Rhett murmured, his voice sounding flat in the acoustically dampened chamber. You are certain? He turned. Empress Seraphine Kaida stood at the chamber's sealed entrance, flanked by her two guards. She had shed her formal robes for a simple, practical tunic. Her biography was a guarded, sharp silver, the color of skepticism. I am, Rhett said, pointing to his console display. The visualization showed the song of the array as a series of complex, interwoven sine waves. He indicated a jagged, ugly spike that repeated on a precise 30-second cycle. That's not decay. That's a signal. Someone is actively poisoning the well. Your Majesty. Someone is injecting harmonic noise into the array. She stepped onto the gantry, moving closer to him. Her gaze fixed on the anomaly. Kahlor's faction insists the machine is failing because it is being touched by an inferior species. By you. With respect, Kahlor is an idiot, Rhett said simply. He did not say it with malice, but with the weary finality of an expert diagnosing a problem. He thinks this is a holy relic. I think it is a very, very badly maintained piece of precision hardware. He moved to another console, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. The ancestors who built this were brilliant, but the engineers who maintain it now just polish the housing? They are terrified of it. Seraphine watched him. The chamber did not awe him. He was not reverent. He was annoyed. Like a master plumber looking at a poorly installed sink. He moved with an economy of motion, his hands tracing patterns on the console that seemed to coax, rather than command, the system. He would often pause, tilt his head, and murmur to the interface, "No, that's not right. Show me the secondary flow." "You speak to it," she observed, her voice quiet. As if it were a living thing. Rhett did not look up. It is a living thing, in a way. He found the data stream he wanted and began running a diagnostic filter. It's a relationship. This core and the 12 subarrays are supposed to be in perfect harmony. They are partners. Right now. They are barely speaking. The signal is full of noise, and the resonance is drifting because nobody has bothered to ask the machine what it needs. "And your solution, Master Calder?" she asked. A dangerous edge to her voice. "What does the machine need? Basic marriage maintenance. Your Majesty." Seraphine's head snapped toward him, her biography, which had been a cold silver, suddenly flared with a shocked, deep rose color. "That is inappropriate." Rhett finally looked at her, a hint of his wry smile returning. "Is it you cannot ignore a partner for 500 years and expect them to hold the house up indefinitely? The array is not a god. It's a partner. It needs to be listened to. It needs adjustment. It needs to find that core resonance again." He turned back to the console. "This fracture here," he tapped the screen. "Someone is deliberately trying to force a divorce." Seraphine's blush, or rather, the rose-gold light under her skin faded, but she did not reprimand him. She filed the analogy away. It was crude, human, and startlingly accurate. She had been treating her entire world as a thing to be commanded, not a relationship to be maintained. "Find out who," she ordered, her voice clipped, "and fix it." "Yes, Your Majesty." He already knew who. Interference's harmonic signature was sophisticated, brutal. It had the fingerprints of the Helian Directorate all over it. The embargo was the public face of the attack. This was the dagger in the back. But Helion needed an inside man. In a shielded room, deep in the aristocratic sector of the spire, High Lord Kahlor Draith met with his true partner. The man was not Aurelian. He was human. He wore the precise, minimalist suit of a Helian Directorate executive. His name was Director Valerius, and his eyes were as cold and empty as a boardroom table. The human mechanic is in the core chamber, Kalor hissed. His biography a dull, angry gray. Seraphine has given him full access. He is unnervingly competent. He stabilized the southeast terrace. He did, Valerius agreed, sipping a cup of water. He seemed utterly unconcerned. Rhett Calder, a resident architect, grade 4, the last survivor of the Odyssey project. We were very surprised when he surfaced here. He has been hiding as a tinkerer for 3 years. A waste of his talent. Kalor stared. You knew who he was. Of course. The Directorate does not leave such variables to chance, High Lord. His presence here is an opportunity. He is good. He will find the resonance fractures. He will find the sabotage. And what happens then? Kalor demanded, his xenophobic arrogance warring with his sudden fear. He will trace it back to us. He will trace it back to you. Valerius corrected him softly. And when he does, you will use the evidence. You will convene the council. You will express your outrage that the Helion Directorate has been forced to take such unfortunate measures because of Empress Seraphine's reckless instability. You will use the very attack we created as proof that she is unfit to rule. Kalor slowly understood. The attack leverages my position. The embargo pressures her. The failing array pressures her from within. You, Lord Kalor, will be seen as the voice of reason, who urges her to sign the dependency treaty to save your people. The Directorate gets its energy rights. And you, Valerius smiled, a thin, reptilian gesture, get to be the regent who stabilizes the Empire. Kalor's biography settled, his ambition overriding his brief panic. And the human Calder. He is the catalyst, Valerius said, lowering his cup. And catalysts, by their nature, are consumed by the reaction. He will make progress, and that progress will create a new opportunity for us. Be ready for it. The opportunity came 2 days later. Rhett had successfully dampened the first resonance fracture. He had not removed it, that was impossible without a full system reboot, but he had bandaged it, introducing a counterfrequency that effectively neutralized the noise. The southeast quadrant stabilized, its tremors reduced by 60%. The court was cautiously optimistic. Seraphine was impressed. Kalor Draith was furious. The next morning, a plasma conduit on the lower levels ruptured. It was a controlled explosion. The damage was minimal, contained by the internal bulkheads, but the sound and shock of it ripped through the spire. Alarms blared. Fear, which had just begun to recede, returned with a vengeance. Within an hour, Kalor Draith had convened an emergency council meeting. Rhett was summoned to the Grand Concourse, the same room where he had first made Seraphine laugh. There was no laughter now. The hall was filled with anxious, glittering nobles. Seraphine sat on the high dais, her face pale, her biography a stormy, churning purple. Kalor Draith stood in the center of the hall, the picture of righteous fury. Your Majesty, Council members, we placed our faith in an off-worlder, a primate. He spat the word. And this is the result. His adjustments have destabilized the primary power feeds. He has ruptured a plasma main. He is tearing our home apart, piece by piece. All eyes turned to Rhett. He stood alone, his coveralls looking shockingly out of place amid the silk and armor. Master Calder, Seraphine's voice was tight. Do you have a response? Rhett looked at Kalor, his expression unreadable. He activated his personal data pad and projected a holographic display into the center of the room. High Lord, Rhett said, his voice casual, as if discussing the weather. You are almost correct. The plasma conduit did rupture. He brought up a complex timeline of the spire's energy logs. This, he pointed to a green line, is my work. The dampening of the alpha quadrant fracture. You can see. It was completed at 0200. The tremors in that sector ceased. He then pointed to a bright red spike on the timeline. This is the plasma rupture. It occurred at 0745, 5 hours later, in a sector 20 kilometers away. The destabilization would cascade, Keller shouted. Your meddling caused it. That is a fascinating theory, High Lord, Rhett said, his voice laced with the driest humor. I thought so, too. So, I ran a real-time simulation of the energy cascade from my adjustment. The hologram shifted. It showed the spire, with a blue wave of stabilizing energy moving through one quadrant. The rest of the spire remained unaffected. As you can see, the cascade was, as designed, fully contained. It never came within 10 kilometers of the ruptured conduit. Kaylor's biograph flickered. The data is lying? It is his simulation. Oh, the data is definitely lying, Rhett agreed cheerfully. Just not my data. He zoomed in on the energy log of the conduit itself. You see, a normal resonance cascade failure looks like this. The image showed a slow, rising wave of energy, a buildup, and then a messy breach. It's like a tire popping from too much pressure. Messy, chaotic, predictable. He then changed the image to the actual log from that morning's explosion. It was not a wave. It was a single, needle-thin spike of impossible energy, lasting less than a millisecond. This, Rhett said, is not a tire pop. This is a bullet. A military-grade plasma charge, precisely detonated at the conduit's weakest joint. The council gasped. But the best part, Rhett continued, clearly enjoying himself, is that the saboteur became lazy. They planted the charge, but to cover their tracks. They tried to alter the engineering logs. They tried to build a false energy wave to make it look like a cascade. He overlaid another graph. But they got the math wrong. They miscalculated the plasma's thermal diffusion rate. The log data they faked, he pointed to a glaring error, is physically impossible. It suggests the plasma was somehow hotter after it left the pipe. Unless you have invented magic. High Lord, this data was tampered with. He shut off the display. The hall was silent. Rhett looked directly at Kaylor, his smile gone. It seems the conduit did not just fail. Your lordship, it was persuaded. Vehemently. My work tends to be quieter. I suggest, he finished, his voice dropping, you find the person on your staff who faked this log. He had not accused Kaylor directly. He had not needed to. He had exposed the lie, cleared his name, and proven the existence of a saboteur, all in one calm, technical takedown. Seraphine's biography settled into a deep, thoughtful indigo. She had chosen her mechanic well. That night, Rhett was not in the core chamber. He was in his small, borrowed workshop. The calm, humorous mechanic was gone. He stared at the data signature of the plasma charge. He recognized it instantly. It was a Helion Directorate breacher charge. It was the exact same type of explosive that had been used to rupture the containment field on the Odyssey. The explosion that had vented his team into the vacuum of space. His hands were clenched so tightly, his knuckles were white. The casual, easygoing persona was a suit of armor he wore, but underneath it, the resonant architect was boiling. Anger was cold, pure. It was the same people, the same tactics. They had killed his friends, his mentors, his entire life. And now they are here. He vowed, in the silence of his workshop, that he would see them burn. He would expose every lie, every murder, every compromised official. But as he took a deep, shuddering breath, the architect took control of the man. Anger made for sloppy engineering. Revenge was a bad variable. He could not be hot. He had to be cold. He had to be precise. He would not let his anger compromise his work. He would channel it. He would use that cold, clear fury to focus. He would not just save the Spire. He would dismantle the Helion Directorate from the inside out, using nothing but their own data. Seraphine was also awake. She was in her private observatory, a dome of pure crystal that looked out on the stars. The embargo was strangling her people. Kalor was a traitor in her midst. Her entire world was balanced on the skill of a single human she had known for less than a week. Her biography was a mess. It was not one color, but a dozen, flickering in a chaotic, noisy pattern. Pale yellows of anxiety, deep reds of anger, cold blues of fear. It was the visual representation of her frayed nerves. "You summoned me, Your Majesty." Rhett stood in the doorway. He had been called to give his nightly report. He saw her, saw the uncontrolled static of her biograph. He saw an organism under unbearable stress. "Your report." "Master Calder," she said, her voice tight. She did not turn to look at him. He stepped into the room. "The secondary dampeners are holding. I have isolated the saboteur's back doors. I am cleaning the system." "But that is not why you called me." She finally turned. "What do you mean?" "You are running too hot, Your Majesty," he said. He kept his voice low, technical, not emotional. "Your signal-to-noise ratio is shot. You are harmonically dissonant." Seraphine's eyes flashed, her biography flaring red. "I am not one of your machines, Master Calder." "Everything is a machine, in a way," he countered, moving no closer. "Your biography is feeding back on itself. Your anxiety is creating noise, which is creating more anxiety. You need to reset your baseline." "And how?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcastic venom. "Do you suggest I do that meditation breathing?" he said. "No, not like that," he said, as she took a sharp, angry breath. "Breathe with the Spire. You have lived your entire life inside this array. You must feel it. The primary hum. It is on a 30-second cycle. It is the most stable thing in your life. Match it." She stared at him, bewildered. "Just listen," he urged, his voice dropping. "Feel it through the floor. It is there, a low, slow pulse. Inhale with it. Hold. Exhale with it. Try." She was desperate. She was exhausted. She closed her eyes. The lights of her biography flickered wildly. "I cannot find it," she whispered. "Stop trying to find it. Just let it happen. It is already there. Breathe in 2, 3, 4. His voice was a low, steady anchor in her chaotic observatory. "And out 2, 3, 4, she tried. Her breathing was ragged. "Slower. Match the machine. It is holding you up. Let it hold you. In and out." He guided her. He did not touch her. He just provided the rhythm, a calm voice in the dark. Slowly, miraculously, her breathing evened. She found the ancient, slow heartbeat of the palace. She matched it, and as her breathing slowed, the chaotic noise of her biography began to fade. The angry reds dissipated. The anxious yellows smoothed out. The colors merged, coalesced, and finally settled into a single, deep, calm ocean blue. They stood in silence for a full minute, just breathing. The only sound was the faint, subsonic hum of the Aegis array. It was the first true peace she had felt in months. It was technical. It was not emotional. And yet, it was the most profoundly intimate moment of her life. She opened her eyes. He was watching her, his expression neutral. "How?" she started, her voice hoarse. "Bioharmonic resonance," he said, the mechanic returning. Sometimes the system just needs a manual reset. You should sleep. Your Majesty, the machine runs better after a full diagnostic. He nodded, gave a slight bow, and left her alone in the quiet. He did not go to sleep. He went back to the core. He had a new lead. The saboteur, in faking the logs, had to access the root directory. In doing so, they had accidentally unlocked a data cache that had been sealed for centuries. A section of the array's navigation core that even the Aurelian engineers had forgotten existed. Rhett opened the cache. It was ancient. The files were written in a language that predated the modern Aurelian tongue. But as he dug deeper, past the layers of forgotten code, his blood ran cold. He found a block of programming. It was not Aurelian at all. It was written in a long-dead machine language. But he recognized the syntax. He recognized the elegant, brutally efficient structure. It was human. Buried in the deepest heart of the Aegis array, the machine that defined the entire Aurelian Empire was a signature, a small, hidden watermark, left by its true designers. Terra Gov, Architectus Program Arc Est, 2144, the resident architects of old Earth, his ancestors, his predecessors. The Aurelians had not built this alone. They had help. The ancestors they revered had been in partnership with humans. Rhett closed the file, his mind reeling. He hid his discovery immediately, sealing the cache behind a wall of his own code. If Seraphine found out, it would shatter her government, her religion, her entire culture. He had come here for a job. He had stayed because of the Helion Directorate. Now, he was staying for a different reason. This was not just an Aurelian palace. This was a human legacy. And the Helion Directorate was not just trying to conquer a planet. They were trying to erase history. "All right," Rhett whispered to the humming crystal. "Let's see what else you have been hiding." He would not tell Seraphine the truth. Not yet. But he would dig. He would know what that alliance had been, and he would use that knowledge as a weapon. The Helion Directorate wanted to play. They had just pulled the last resident architect into a game their ancestors had begun. The Starlight Soiree was Seraphine's political theater, and Rhett Calder was her unwilling star. He found this out when she came to his workshop personally. It was a space he had requisitioned, deep in the engineering sector, smelling of ozone and metal shavings. He was elbow-deep in the archaic human code he had found. Cross-referencing it with the Aurelian harmonics, the link was undeniable. His ancestors had built this place. "You are required in the Grand Concourse in 2 hours. Master Calder." Rhett glanced up, wiping his hands on a rag. Seraphine stood in the doorway, flanked by her guards. She was already in formal attire, a deep indigo gown that seemed to absorb the light in the messy room. Her bio was cool, controlled silver. Soiree," Rhett said, arching an eyebrow. "Your Majesty, I appreciate the thought, but I only own 2 sets of coveralls. One of them is currently in a deep philosophical debate with a lubricant stain." "You will be provided with appropriate attire," she said, her voice flat. "You are attending as my royal consultant on ancient harmonics." "A title I invented this morning." Rhett stopped wiping his hands. He leaned against the workbench. "A royal consultant. That sounds exposed." "That is the point." Her silver biography flickered. "Kaelor Draith has been spreading propaganda that you are a barbarian, a primate tinkerer who is ruining the array. His faction is gaining traction. The Directorate's embargo is making everyone desperate. And you want to show me off," Rhett finished. "To prove I can use a fork. To poke the xenophobes." "I want to show them that I am not intimidated," she corrected him. "You are my expert. You will stand by my side. You will look intelligent. You will not," she added, her eyes narrowing slightly. make any jokes about loose bolts. A tall order, Your Majesty. But I will endeavor to disappoint you. The grand concourse was unrecognizable. The marble floors had been polished to a mirror finish, and the great crystalline ceiling, which usually showed the roiling clouds of Thalassa Prime, was now transparent to the void. The stars of the Aurelian system glittered above them, a diamond dust tapestry. Nobles drifted through the hall like elegant ghosts, their biographs a polite, shimmering kaleidoscope of calculated pastels. Rhett felt like a block of concrete. The formal Aurelian tunic they had given him was stiff, heavy, and embroidered with silver thread that pricked his neck. He stood beside Seraphine's dais, feeling solid, grounded, and intensely human. "You look uncomfortable, Master Calder," Seraphine murmured, without looking at him. "This suit has a higher thread count than my entire vocabulary," Rhett murmured back. "I am afraid I will break it if I exhale too quickly." Her lips twitched. The brief moment of humor vanished as the great doors opened. Hi, Lord Kaelor Draith entered. His biography was a flat, arrogant white, and he was not alone. Walking beside him, moving with an unnerving, predatory grace, was the human Rhett had seen in the secure room, Director Valerius. He wore a severe, impeccably tailored Hellion Directorate suit, a stark black against the Aurelian pastels. "Your Majesty," Kaelor announced, his voice booming with false sincerity. "May I present a most honored guest?" "Director Valerius of the Hellion Directorate. He has come," Kaelor smiled, "to graciously negotiate an end to this unfortunate embargo." The hall fell silent. This was not a negotiation. It was a power play. Kaelor had not just invited the enemy. He had escorted him to the throne as an equal. Seraphine's biograph froze into a deep, cold violet. "Director, your presence is unexpected." Valerius inclined his head, his smile thin. "Empress, my directorate is deeply concerned for the stability of your home. We are here to offer a solution, a partnership." His gaze scanned the dais and settled on Rhett. For a split second, Valerius's smile widened. It was a smile of pure, surgical ice. It was a smile that said, "I see you. I know exactly what you are. You are the loose end." Rhett's blood went cold. This was him. This was the man who had given the order, the face of the organization that had slaughtered his team. Valerius looked away, back to the Empress. His mask of diplomacy perfect. Rhett knew, with chilling certainty, that his cover was blown. The Directorate knew who he was. He needed to move. He needed information. He leaned slightly toward Seraphine. "Your Majesty, with apologies. All this refinement," he gestured vaguely, "must be causing a power fluctuation. I should check the gallery relay. As your consultant." Seraphine understood immediately. She needed him off the stage as much as he did. "Of course. Master Calder, your diligence is appreciated." Rhett nodded curtly to the Empress, ignoring Kaelor and Valerius completely. He stepped off the dais and walked, not ran, toward the East Gallery. Every eye in the hall, following the strange, solitary human. He disappeared into a service corridor, the heavy door hissing shut behind him. He did not go to the gallery relay. He sprinted down the narrow, dimly lit corridor, his hard-soled boots echoing. He was now in Spire's bones. He found a primary comms junction, ripped the panel off, and jacked his datapad into the fiber lattice. He was not a guest. He was not a consultant. He was an infiltrator. He bypassed the guest network protocols and drove straight into the secure channels. Kaelor would be arrogant. He would be using his private comms. Rhett found the channel, encrypted but vulnerable. He piggybacked onto the signal, his fingers a blur across his datapad. He was listening. He heard Kaylor speaking, not to Valerius, but to an internal contact, a captain of the Spire's own security force. "The charges are set," Kaylor's voice hissed, tinny and sharp. "The Obsidian Pinnacle. It is scheduled for a resonance buffer maintenance at the High Watch." Rhett's blood froze. The Obsidian Pinnacle was one of the largest residential towers, home to nearly 5,000 Aurelie, including many of the technical and engineering families. The voice continued. "The humans' recent fixes will be blamed. When the charges sever the primary anchors, the resulting imbalance will shear the adjoining structures. It will be a tragic, catastrophic accident. The Empress's pet mechanic will have failed her. She will have no choice but to sign." This was it. The endgame. Not just sabotage, mass murder. A manufactured crisis to break Seraphine's will and frame him for the slaughter. Rhett pulled his datapad, his mind racing. He had to warn Seraphine. He had to get to the Pinnacle's core. He bolted back toward the concourse, but took a detour. He needed air. He needed a moment to think, to let the cold rage settle into the precision of the architect. He burst onto a high observation balcony, the stratospheric wind tearing at his stiff tunic. The balcony was open to the void, dark and bitterly cold. She was already there. Seraphine stood alone at the railing, her back to him. She was wrapped in a thin, formal cloak, staring at the pinprick stars. Her biography was a muted, troubled, pulsing blue. She was not the Empress. She was a woman trapped. Rhett slowed his pace, the urgency of the threat warring with the sudden, stark vulnerability in front of him. He said nothing, but she must have sensed him. "They are picking my bones, Master Calder," she said, her voice quiet, almost carried away by the wind. She did not turn. "Director Valerius, he spoke of partnership. He means subjugation." And Kaylor stood there, smiling, as if offering me a gift. She shivered, a violent, involuntary tremor that shook her entire frame. The wind was relentless, a physical presence, cutting through her thin cloak. "Your Majesty, we have a problem," Rhett started. "A severe one. It seems, Master Calder, that problem is the only thing we have in abundance." She turned, her face pale in the starlight. She looked so very tired. "He offered me peace, Rhett. Peace if I just surrender. If I just give him my world." Oh, Rhett saw the tremor in her hands. He had an insane, human urge to take off his borrowed, ridiculous tunic and wrap it around her. He stopped himself. Protocol. She was sitting on a bench carved from the same cold, dark stone as the balcony floor. She looked at him, her gaze raw. "Please, sit with me, just for a moment. I find I am terribly tired of being alone." He hesitated, the comlog of Kaylor's plot burning in his mind. But the look on her face said the machine could wait 60 seconds. He sat, leaving a careful, respectful distance between them. The stone was ice cold, leaching the warmth from him instantly. The wind howled, a low, mournful sound. Seraphine shivered again, wrapping her arms around herself. Then, with a sigh that sounded like the breaking of a tension wire, she slid across the bench. She did not stop at a polite distance. She moved until her shoulder, arm, and thigh were pressed firmly against his. The contact was shocking, immediate, and profoundly warm. He could feel the fine, involuntary trembling in her muscles as her body tried to fight the cold. She stared straight ahead, at the endless black, dotted with stars. Her biography softened from its troubled blue to a pale, questioning lavender. "Is this how humans share heat?" she whispered, the question almost identical to the first time. but stripped of its innocence. This was not curiosity. It was a need. Rhett turned his head to look at her profile. The wind whipped a strand of her dark hair across her face. He felt the cold rage at Kaelin, the terror of the plot. All of it pause. This one, small, warm, trembling woman, was the center of the storm. "It is part of it," he said, his voice low, matching hers. "It is efficient," she murmured, seeming to relax into the contact, her shivering easing slightly. "We find it helps," he said. They sat in silence for a long moment. Two living beings huddled together for warmth on a balcony of ice, suspended over a gas giant. The absurdity was not lost on him. "I am so very tired, Rhett," she whispered, and the use of his first name felt more intimate than the physical contact. "I wear this power like a suit of armor. I cannot show weakness. I cannot show doubt. My biography betrays every flicker of fear, so I must train myself to feel nothing. And Kaelor uses that. He paints me as cold, as unstable. If I am warm, I am weak. If I am cold, I am a tyrant. There is no way to win." The raw honesty of her confession broke something in him. The armor he wore, the glib mechanic, cracked. "I know what it is like to wear armor," he said, his voice rough. He looked away from her, at the stars his team would never see. "The Helion Directorate. The organization that Man Valerius represents is why I am a mechanic. I was not always." She turned her head, her gaze fixed on him. "I used to lead a team," he said, the words tasting like ash. "A research group, back on Terra. We were working on resonance, advanced gravitational theory. The Directorate wanted our work. They wanted to weaponize it. We refused." He paused, the memory sharp and clear. "They set charges, just like Kaelor is doing now. They rigged our lab's containment field to fail. They called it an accident, a tragic loss. I was in an external diagnostic pod when it blew. I was the only survivor. I watched my entire life. My friends and I watched them venting into the dark." He finally looked at her. "I wear this tinkerer persona, so they will not find the resident architect who survived. So they will not know there is someone left who knows what they did. And what they are." Seraphine's biography was a deep, stunned, empathetic rose. She did not pull away. If anything, she leaned into him more. "You are not just a mechanic," she whispered. "And you," he said, meeting her gaze, "are not just an Empress." "This is a dangerous secret," Rhett called her. "I seem to be collecting them, Your Majesty." He forced a small, grim smile. "But for right now, Kaelor is moving. He is planning to detach the obsidian pinnacle." The warmth between them instantly turned to ice. Seraphine sprang to her feet. "What? When? Now," Rhett said, standing, his datapad already in his hand. "The maintenance is scheduled for the High Watch? He's going to kill 5,000 people and blame us. We must evacuate," she said, her voice shaking, the Empress returning. "No time," Rhett said, his voice sharp, the architect now in full command. "He has already locked the systems. I cannot stop the charges here. They are shielded." "Then what do we do?" she demanded. "We cannot stop the explosion," Rhett said, his eyes scanning the balcony. "But maybe we can catch the tower." He ran from her, not back to the concourse, but to a large service panel on the far wall of the balcony. It was a primary resonance node for the entire upper spire. He tore the lid, exposing a complex array of crystalline contacts. "This is going to get loud, Your Majesty," he warned. He plunged his hands into the array, his datapad linked to the interface. He closed his eyes, filtering out the wind, the distant party music. He listened. He found obsidian pinnacle frequencies. He could hear it, a clear, high-pitched harmonic, and underneath it he heard the subsonic countdown timer of the helium detonators. 3 minutes, he breathed. Rhett. Seraphine was on his shoulder. I cannot stop the blast, but I can change the field around the blast. I am going to try to create a gravitational net. When they cut the lines, I am going to try and catch it. That is impossible. The math is questionable, he admitted. His teeth gritted. But I am a very good mechanic. He found the frequency of the detonators. He found the anchor points. Kaylor was severing all 12 primary locks simultaneously. The tower would fall clean away. 10 seconds, he whispered. Your Majesty, hold on to something. He could feel the charges priming, a spike of energy in the network. 5, 4, 3, 2. At the exact microsecond before the detonation, Rhett did not brace the field. He reversed it. He slammed his will into the resonance node, reversing the polarity of the entire quadrant's gravitational field. Instead of pushing the pinnacle up, he pulled it down. He was telling the spire to catch. The charges detonated. There was no sound, only a profound, sickening lurch that threw Seraphine against the wall. The entire echelon spire groaned, a sound of a dying beast, the obsidian pinnacle. Its anchors severed, dropped. But it did not fall into the void. It fell inward, caught by Rhett's reversed harmonic field. It slammed back into its docking ring with a scream of tortured metal that echoed through the entire palace. The tower was crippled. The docking ring was shattered, but it held. In the chaotic backlash of energy from the explosions, a tidal wave of raw data surged through the node. Rhett did not let it dissipate. He opened a channel on his datapad and caught it. He siphoned the entire, unique energy signature of the helium detonators, the fingerprint of the saboteur, and locked it in his secure storage. He pulled his hands back from the smoking panel. He was shaking, drenched in sweat. The spire was groaning, settling, but it was stable. He had saved them. The balcony doors opened. Kaylor Draith stood there, flanked by guards. His face a mask of triumph that quickly curdled into confusion. He had expected to find a scene of chaos. Instead, he found the Empress and her mechanic, standing beside a smoking panel on an intact, if groaning, balcony. "Hi, Lord," Seraphine said, her voice lethally cold. Her biography was not fear or relief. It was a blade of pure, white-hot fury. "You are just in time. It appears we have a problem with our maintenance schedules." The fallout was immediate and disastrous. The next morning, the council hall was in chaos. The obsidian pinnacle was stable, but heavily damaged. Hundreds had been injured on impact. Kaylor Draith was at the podium, and he was not defending. He was attacking. "We have seen the truth," he thundered, his biography a pulsed, righteous crimson. The human failed his constant meddling, his arrogant fixes. They caused a resonance overload. He nearly cost us the obsidian pinnacle and 5,000 souls. He is a menace. The Directorate was right to warn us. This human is the source of all our instability. The conservative faction roared in agreement. "Remove the human sign, the treaty saved the spire." Seraphine stood. The hall fell silent. Her biograph was a blade of Arctic blue, so cold it burned. "No," the word cut through the panic. "Master Calder did not cause the incident," she said, her voice ringing with absolute authority. "He prevented the disaster. He was with me." He countered a deliberate, malicious act of sabotage. "He saved the obsidian pinnacle." "Lies," Kaylor shrieked. He has blinded you with his human tricks. You consort with this primate. I stand by my royal consultant, Seraphine declared, her voice rising. The evidence of explosive charges is being analyzed as we speak. Rhett Calder is under my personal, imperial protection. His work will continue, and I will find the traitor who planted those bombs. She had silenced them, but she had paid a terrible price. The hall was starkly divided. The conservatives, the traditionalists, the xenophobes saw an empress defying tradition, charmed by an alien, risking their very lives for him. She had defended Rhett, the person, but she had crippled Seraphine, the empress. Her political capital was hemorrhaging. Rhett, meanwhile, was not in the hall. He had the energy signature. He knew it was Helion, but he needed to know why. Why this array? What was the Terragov connection? He used his new royal consultant access to enter the one place no one ever went, the Archive of Echoes. It was not a data center. It was a tomb, a vast, cold, circular library where all of Aurelian history and science was stored in faintly glowing crystalline matrices. He was not looking for history. He was looking for blueprints, the originals. He bypassed the cultural records and went straight to the core engineering files, the ones labeled Aegis Array, Primeval. He found a map, an original schematic, so old the crystal was clouded. It was not just a machine. It was biological. It was a complex circulatory system. He saw the core chamber. He saw the 12 subarrays. But he also saw something else. Something that was dark on every modern schematic. A central, massive node that connected everything. The map called it the Core Leonis, the lion's heart. According to the schematic, the Core Leonis was the true core. It was an impossible power oscillator designed by Terragov architects. It was dormant. It had been offline for centuries. The gentle hum, the spire, ran on it was the backup generator. Rhett traced the activation protocol. His breath caught in his throat. It was not a password. It was not a key. It was a biological lock. The protocol required two things to initialize the restart: the genetic signature of the Aurelian royal line, and a biologically compatible resonance signature from a Terragov architect. The array was not just a partnership. It was a fusion. It was waiting for a human and an Aurelian, together, to turn its heart back on. It was waiting for him. He was downloading the map when his datapad chimed. A Priority 1 message, forwarded from the Empress. He opened it. It was a formal, public transmission from Director Valerius. The Empress's continued refusal to accept stability, the text scrolled, and the clear and present danger posed by her pet human terrorist. Have forced our hand. The energy embargo is now total. We are broadcasting a sector-wide danger to navigation warning. No ships in or out. Rhett read the last line, his blood turning to ice. The Empress has 3 cycles to sign the Treaty of Dependency. After that, the Directorate can no longer be responsible for the unstable forces that threaten her palace. It was an execution order, a declaration of war. In 3 days, they would finish the job Kaelor had started. They would destroy the Spire. He left the archive and went straight to Seraphine's strategy room. She was alone. The room dark, save for the light of the ultimatum on her main screen. She had dismissed her panicked advisors. She was just staring at the words. She turned as he entered. The full weight of her world, the political failure, the military threat, the sabotage, it all rested on this one moment. Her biography was not scary. It was not angry. It was a cold, hard, clear blue. The color of a winter sky. Absolute. Final color. 3 days, Master Calder, she said, her voice flat. They have given us 3 days until they kill us all. Rhett held up his datapad, displaying the glowing, ancient map of the Cor Leonis. No, Your Majesty, he said, the shadow of a smile returning to his face. They have given us 3 days to turn the heart back on. The ultimatum was no measure of time. It was a countdown to an execution. On the 3rd day, the Helion Directorate stopped pretending. The sky above the Echelon spire began to scream. It was not a sound, not at first. It was a pressure, a deep, subsonic, gravitational resonance that shook the spire to its bones. High Lord Kalor Draith had been injecting harmonic noise into the array. A poison scalpel. This was different. This was a sledgehammer. Rhett and Seraphine were in the main strategy room, watching the holographic display of Thalassa Prime's upper atmosphere. A network of light, a vast, complex web of energy, was forming, blanketing the stratosphere for 1,000 kilometers in every direction. The Helion fleet, invisible and distant, had deployed their jamming net. They are not just cutting us off, Rhett said, his voice grim. The deck beneath his feet was vibrating in a new, sickening rhythm. They are actively trying to tear the array out. They are broadcasting a wave of pure, chaotic dissonance. They are going to shake this palace apart. Alarms began to blare, a chorus of rising panic from every corner of the spire. Lights flickered, stabilized, and then flickered again, overwhelmed by the energy fluctuations. You said you could turn the heart on, Seraphine said, her voice tight, her hands gripping the edge of the console. Her biography was a storm of electric purple, a mirror of the sky outside. The Cor Leonis. Yes, Rhett said. He looked at the map he had found, the ancient schematic of the lion's heart. But the backup generator we are running on now, it cannot fight this jamming and the internal sabotage. To light the main engine, we have to get to the true core, the primary axis. Then we go, she said, turning to her guards. Full tactical. Now, it is not that simple, Rhett said, stopping her. He finally looked at her, the gravity of 3 years of hiding settling onto his shoulders. The mechanic's time was up. Your Majesty Seraphine. The schematic was very specific. The Cor Leonis is a biotechnical lock. It was designed to prevent exactly this situation. It requires 2 distinct, living signals to initialize. 2 keys. The royal bloodline, Seraphine said, her eyes narrowing. The archives were clear. My signature is the first key. What is the second? Rhett took a deep breath. The spire gave a violent lurch, throwing them both against the console. The screaming in the sky had become a physical, audible roar. The second key, Rhett said, meeting her gaze, is the signature of a TerraGov resonant architect. Seraphine stared at him. The implications of the statement, of the ancient human code he had found, settled on her. But the architects are gone. They have been gone for centuries. Not all of them, Rhett said. The mechanic you hired, the primate tinkerer, that was a lie. A cover. My name is Rhett Calder. I am a resident architect. Grade 4. I am the last survivor of the Odyssey program, the direct inheritor of the technology that built this array. He tapped his own chest. My biological resonance signature. I am the second key. For a moment, Seraphine did not react. She processed the information, the lie, the revelation, the impossible, desperate hope. Her biography flickered, from the purple of the storm to a flash of shocked white, and then settled into a hard, focused blade of Arctic blue. She had been betrayed, but she had also been given a weapon. She chose the weapon. You have been lying to me since the day you arrived, she said, her voice lethally quiet. I have been surviving, Your Majesty. Rhett corrected her. Just like you. Now this grid is reaching a critical phase. We have maybe 20 minutes before the primary anchors begin to shear. We can discuss my employment history later. Or we can go save 5 million tons of Pallas. Seraphine's lips thinned. Captain, she barked to her personal guard. We are moving to the central core axis. Full priority. Lethal force authorized. Master Calder. She fixed him with a look of cold fire. You had better be worth the lie. I intend to be, Your Majesty, Rhett said, grabbing his datapad. Let's go. The central core axis was not the quiet, cathedral-like chamber Rhett had worked in before. That was the maintenance hub. This was the engine room, the true heart, buried deep in the gravitational center of the spire, accessible only by a single, shielded service shaft. Seraphine led the way, flanked by 4 of her elite Imperial Guard. They were clad in articulated, ivory-white armor, carrying harmonic pulse rifles. Seraphine herself had a small, elegant sidearm at her hip. Rhett, in his grease-stained coveralls and carrying his datapad, felt profoundly underdressed. The elevator opened not into a chamber, but into a long, dark corridor. The air was cold, static. The walls were not metal, but a strange, black, non-reflective crystal. This is it, Rhett said, his voice low. The resonance maze, the final security system. I see no maze, the guard captain said, raising his rifle, his helmet sensor sweeping the darkness. You will, Rhett warned. It is not a physical trap. It is a sensory one. The founders, both ours and yours, wanted to ensure that only someone with a stable mind, a resonant architect, could get through. It is designed to disrupt intruders. Duly noted, the captain said, unimpressed. They advanced. The first trap hit them 10 meters in. It was a low-frequency magnetic wave. Suddenly, the floor was no longer the floor. The guards stumbled, their armor groaning as their equilibrium systems failed. Vertigo, one guard yelled, falling to one knee. The corridor is spinning. It is not, Rhett shouted over the rising panic. Breathe. Trust your feet, not your ears. It is a harmonic illusion, Seraphine, who had stumbled against the wall. Her biograph, flaring with disorientation, glared at him. Your breathing trick. It is not a trick, it is a tool, Rhett snapped. He closed his eyes, found the 30-second cycle of the backup array, and anchored himself to it. Match me. Find the hum, inhale, exhale. Now. He forced the panicked guards to match his breathing. He forced Seraphine to find that center she had found in the observatory. Slowly, agonizingly. The illusion of vertigo receded. They were not spinning. They were standing in a straight hallway. Well, Rhett said, wiping sweat from his forehead. That is one way to get the heart rate up. They moved on, more cautiously. The second trap was more subtle, and far more sinister. A field of white noise washed over them, and with it, a wave of sensory deprivation. Captain, one of the guards said, his voice tight with fear. My rifle, I am holding it, but I cannot feel it. Another guard tapped his chest plate. My armor feels like paper. I can feel the air on my skin. Memory smear, Rhett diagnosed, his own hands feeling distant and numb. It is a field that edits your sensory input. It convinces your brain that what you are touching is not real. It leads to panic. You drop your weapons. You think your armor is gone. You freeze. I can confirm, the captain said, his voice strained. It is highly effective. Seraphine was staring at her own hands, her biography a frantic, flickering static. I cannot feel my biography, she whispered, a true note of terror in her voice. Rhett, I am blank. No, you are not, Rhett said instantly. It is still there. The field is just lying to you. He fumbled in the deep pocket of his coveralls, his fingers, numb and clumsy, closed around a cheap plastic stick. Everyone, look at me, he ordered. He snapped the stick. A brilliant, chemical green light filled the corridor. It was crude. It was primitive. It was analog. The green light, lacking any harmonic frequency for the field to edit, cut through the illusion like a knife. Suddenly, the guards could feel the weight of their rifles. Seraphine gasped as her biograph, a steady, anxious blue, became visible to her again. Rhett grinned, holding up the glowing green stick. Ancient human technology. We call it a glow stick. Never fails. Now let's go. The traps will get worse. They did. They passed through a field that projected their worst fears as auditory hallucinations for Rhett. It was the sound of his team screaming as the Odyssey depressurized. He gritted his teeth, anchored himself to Seraphine's steady breathing beside him, and walked through it. Finally, they reached a great, circular door of black crystal. It slid open, and the noise of the jamming net, the external assault, hit them full force. They had reached Corleones. The chamber was immense, dark, and silent. In the center, suspended in a vacuum field, was a colossal, black, dormant crystal. It was not like the delicate lattice of the backup array. This was a solid, massive, sleeping heart. Around the room were 12 synchronization ports, and in the center, on a raised dais, were 2 crystalline alcoves. One was marked with the soaring, elegant crest of the Aurelian Empire. The other, almost invisible, was etched with the simple, stark sigil of the Teragov architect program. This is it, Rhett said, walking to the dais. The synchronization axis. The spire shuddered violently. A dust shower fell from the ceiling. Rhett, Seraphine said, her voice urgent. The jamming is getting stronger. I know. This is a one-way trip. Once we start, we cannot stop. He entered the alcove marked with the human sigil. It was designed for a human hand. Your Majesty, your alcove. Place your hand on the interface. She moved opposite him, stepping into the Aurelian alcove. She looked at him, her face pale but resolute. What must I do? Just be, Rhett said. He put his hand on the interface. Your biography, your genetic signature. That is your key. I will handle the phasing. I have to find your resonance and lock it to mine. It might feel invasive. Master Calder, Seraphine said, placing her palm on the cool crystal. After the last week, I find I have a very high tolerance for invasive. Do it. Rhett closed his eyes. He let the mechanic fade, let the sarcastic human recede, and let the full power of the resonant architect come forward. He reached. He sent his consciousness out, not as a thought, but as a frequency, a clear, steady, human C-sharp. He heard the chaotic noise of the assault. He found her signal. It was not a single note. It was a complex, flowing river of light and energy. Her biography. Found you. He pushed his resonance toward hers. He felt her flinch, her signal tightening in fear. Do not fight me, Seraphine, he whispered across the chamber. It is not an attack. It is an alignment. Trust me. He heard her take a deep, steadying breath. Her signal, which had recoiled, now opened. It met him. He locked them together. The effect was instantaneous. In the center of the room, the great black Corleones flashed. A single, deafening pulse of pure, white light. A deep, thrumming sound. The sound of a sleeping giant's first heartbeat echoed through the chamber. A wave of pure, stabilizing resonance blasted outward from the core, washing over the entire spire. The screaming of the Helian jamming net momentarily choked. The violent, chaotic vibrations of the palace smoothed out, the dissonance replaced by a deep, powerful harmony. They had pushed back. "It is working!" the guard captain yelled, his helmet sensors showing the primary anchors stabilizing. Rhett was gritting his teeth, sweat pouring down his face. The power was immense, flowing through him, joining with Seraphine's. He could see her biography, not with his eyes, but in his mind a swirling galaxy of gold and blue light, now intertwined with his own steady, silver tone. They were one circuit. "It is holding," Rhett breathed. "We are purging the noise." And then, he screamed. It was not a sound. It was a psychic, harmonic shriek. A new signal, needle-thin and impossibly sharp, had just entered the network. It was not the chaotic noise of the jamming net. This was a focused, targeted, weaponized frequency. It bypassed Seraphine. It ignored the guards. It slammed directly into his resonance. "Rhett!" Seraphine shouted, feeling the backlash through their link. Rhett collapsed to one knee, his hand still fused to the interface. The core Leonis flickered, the thrumming heartbeat stuttering. The spire lurched sickeningly. "It is Kaelor!" Rhett gasped, clutching his head. "He is in a sub-control room. He is using a resonance scalpel, a harmonic dagger. He is trying to cut my signal, to assassinate my frequency, in a hidden control conduit miles away." High Lord Kaelor Draith snarled at his console. He was watching Rhett's life sign, his resonance signature, flicker and die. "So much for the architect," Kaelor hissed. "The human abomination cannot withstand a true Aurelian weapon." Director Valerius had ordered him to stop the activation at all costs. And this was his final, surgical solution. He pushed the power of the harmonic dagger to maximum. In the core, Rhett was fading. The pain was absolute. It was the sound of 1,000 nails scraping on a blackboard inside his skull. His signal was fragmenting. No, not like this. He was an architect. Kaelor was a politician, a brute. He was using a weapon of immense power, but with no finesse. Rhett forced his eyes open. His datapad was still active, slaved to the interface. He could see the inbound attack. It was a torrent of raw, chaotic, untuned energy. Kaelor had not just given him a weapon. He had given him an amplifier. "Seraphine," Rhett gasped, his voice barely a whisper. "Hold on. Do not break the link. No matter what." "I will not," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "Good," Rhett grinned, a bloody, terrifying expression. "Because I am about to turn the volume up." He did not block the harmonic dagger. He opened his resonance to it. He caught the screaming torrent of energy. For one agonizing second, he held it, his entire consciousness ablaze with Kaelor's hatred. And then, with all the skill of a master architect, he tuned it. He took that raw, chaotic wave, focused it, amplified it with the nascent power of the core Leonis, and created a perfect, resonant feedback loop. He sent it right back down the pipe. "If you are going to use a weapon like that," Rhett shouted at the ceiling, his voice suddenly clear and strong, "at least have the decency to tune it first, you amateur." In the sub-control room, Kaelor Draith had only a moment to look up, his eyes wide with terror, as his console chimed a fatal proximity alert. The feedback loop hit his console with the force of a plasma bomb. The entire conduit exploded. The shockwave blew the door off its hinges and sent Kalor flying backward, his body slamming into the far bulkhead. He screamed as shrapnel from the console tore into his arm and face. The harmonic dagger was severed. The console was a smoking ruin. In his panic, Kalor had left one system active, his secure, encrypted comlink to Director Valerius. The feedback surge, the explosion, and the last 30 seconds of Kalor's panicked, "It is failing, he is fighting back." It was all recorded. The data packet, corrupted but intact, was blasted into the Spire's primary logs. A digital fingerprint of treason. Kalor, bleeding and terrified, scrambled to his feet. He clutched his ruined arm and fled the destroyed conduit, disappearing into the chaos of the Spire. Back in the Corleonis chamber, Rhett slumped against the console, his hand falling from the interface. The link was broken. The pain was gone. He was breathing in great, ragged gasps. Seraphine rushed to his side, her biography a swirling, frantic mix of relief and terror. "Rhett, are you hurt?" He waved her off, forcing a weak smile. "Just over-amplified. My ears are ringing. Metaphorically. We won. For now." He looked at the Corleones. The great crystal was no longer black. It was pulsing with a low, steady, white light. The deep thrum of its heartbeat was the new baseline for the entire Spire. The violent lurching had stopped. The lights were steady. The alarms had ceased. Rhett staggered to his datapad, which was showing the external sensor feed. "The good news," he said, wiping blood from his lip, "is that the Corleonis is active. It is at about 15% power, but it is holding the Spire stable. We are no longer falling." "And the bad news?" Seraphine asked, dreading the answer. Rhett pointed to the display. The vast, screaming web of the Helion jamming net was still there. It had been pushed back, but it was retuning, adapting to the Spire's new, stronger harmony. "The bad news," Rhett said, "is that it was only the preliminary assault. Kalor is neutralized, but the Helion fleet is still there. We just stabilized the patient. We have not dealt with the army outside the door. The main attack has not even begun." The partial victory in the Corleonis chamber was a ceasefire, not a surrender. The Spire was stable, its heart beating at a low, steady 15%, but the Helion jamming net was still a suffocating blanket in the stratosphere. Director Valerius had lost his internal saboteur, but he still commanded the fleet. He did not wait. He changed tactics. A formal summons was broadcast on all public channels, bypassing the Empress and addressing the Aurelian Council directly. Director Valerius requested an emergency diplomatic summit to be held in the Grand Concourse. He was coming, he claimed, to offer a final, permanent solution to the crisis. It was a blatant political assassination, aimed at Seraphine's remaining authority. To refuse was to look weak. To accept was to walk into a trap. Seraphine accepted. The Grand Concourse was a haunted hall. The crystalline ceiling, though intact, showed the angry, static-filled purple of the jamming net. The nobles of the council assembled, their biographs a chaotic, flickering sea of pale yellows and anxious greens. They were terrified. Seraphine entered first, flanked by her 4 imperial guards. Her biography was not yellow. It was a cold, hard, Arctic blue. She took her place on the dais, the very picture of composure. Rhett Calder entered with her. He wore the same stiff, formal tunic from the soirée, but he wore it differently now. He was not the mechanic. He was not the consultant. He was the architect. He stood at her right hand, his eyes scanning the hall. Not for friends, but for threats. Director Valerius entered last. He was not the polite envoy. He was the conqueror. He wore his black directorate suit, flanked by 2 imposing, armor-clad Hellion enforcers. He walked to the center of the hall, his smile thin and devoid of all warmth. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice amplified by the hall's acoustics. "We come to offer our final terms, now that this unfortunate instability has reached its peak." "Unfortunate instability?" Seraphine's voice cut through the hall. "That your fleet is actively broadcasting into our atmosphere. A regrettable, defensive measure, I assure you," Valerius said smoothly. "Necessary, as your pet human has proven." As if on cue, a side door opened. High Lord Kalar Draith entered, and the entire council gasped. He was a portrait of martyred nobility. His left arm was in a high-tech sling, his face covered in angry, weeping plasma burns, one eye swollen shut. He was bandaged, broken, but his biography was a pulse of righteous, furious red. He staggered to the center of the hall, pointing his one good hand at Rhett. "There," Kalar roared, his voice thick with pain. "There is the terrorist, the human animal, who has poisoned our home. He found me in my diagnostic station, and when I confronted him, he attacked me. He overloaded his systems, tried to murder me, and destroyed an entire control conduit. He is the saboteur. He is the threat." The conservative faction erupted. "Traitor human filth." Valerius held up a hand, silencing the crowd. "As you can see," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "the situation is untenable. Lord Kalar, a true Aurelian patriot, has been tragically wounded by this interloper." He turned his gaze to Seraphine. The trap was sprung. "The Directorate," Valerius continued, "can no longer recognize your authority while you harbor this human terrorist. Your treaty of dependency is no longer sufficient. The energy rights are a given." He paused, letting the silence stretch, savoring the moment. "We demand a new solution, a permanent bond. To ensure stability, the Directorate proposes a political marriage, binding the Aurelian throne to the Directorate's leadership, a union that will guarantee peace and stabilize the array forever." The hall stopped breathing. Rhett felt his blood turn to ice. This was not about energy. It was about possession. Seraphine's biograph, which had been Arctic blue, flashed white-hot. She rose slowly from her throne. "A marriage," she said, her voice shaking, not with fear, but with a rage so profound it was almost silent. "You send your saboteurs. You attack my core. You try to murder thousands of my citizens. And now, you stand in my hall and ask for my hand. It is a logical, political solution," Valerius said, his smile unwavering. "It ends this conflict without further bloodshed." "I am not a commodity," Seraphine whispered. "Then," her voice rose, echoing from the walls, "I'm no war booty. I am the Empress of the Aurelian Empire, and I refuse." Valerius's smile finally faded. "Then you choose extinction, Your Majesty." "A pity. You would have been educated." The tension was physical, a high-frequency vibration in the air. Kalar looked triumphant. Valerius looked bored, and the council looked resigned to their death. "He is right about one thing," a new voice said. Rhett Calder resigned from the dais. He walked slowly, deliberately, until he stood between Valerius and the throne. "The situation is untenable," Rhett said, his voice calm, conversational. He activated his datapad, and a massive holographic display lit the air above him. "You have all heard Lord Kalar's version of events. Now, let's look at the data." He projected an image first, a complex, jagged energy signature. "This," Rhett said, "is the fingerprint of the explosive charges used to sever the anchors on the obsidian pinnacle. I captured it myself. It is a military-grade, Helion Directorate breacher charge. Highly illegal. Highly effective. Kaelor laughed, a pained, wheezing sound. And who, human, do you imagine planted it? The only unauthorized operative on this spire is you. I am glad you asked, Rhett said. You see, Lord Kaelor, you are correct. I did confront you at the core. Or rather, I confronted your weapon. He changed the display. It was not a graph. It was a corrupted, fragmented data packet. This, Rhett said, is the log from your diagnostic station. The one I allegedly destroyed. You were sloppy, Kaelor. In your panic to escape the feedback loop you created, you left your encrypted comlink to Director Valerius open for 1.3 seconds. Valerius, for the first time, looked alarmed. It is not much, Rhett admitted. But it was enough. I spent all night decrypting it. It is educational. He hit play. The hall was filled with Kaelor's voice, not the strong, righteous roar of a moment ago, but a high-pitched, terrified shriek. Cannot hold him. The core is rephasing Valerius. He is fighting back. He is... The audio was cut by a deafening, harmonic scream. The sound of Rhett's feedback loop, and then an explosion. The hall was utterly, profoundly silent. Rhett looked at Kaelor, his face a mask of cold judgment. The attack you suffered, High Lord, was you shooting yourself in the foot with a harmonic cannon. And this, he pointed to the log's header, is the destination address of your panicked call. The command flagship of the Helion Directorate. You are no patriot, Kaelor. You are a paid traitor, and you, Rhett turned to Valerius, are his employer. Kaelor's biography was not red. It was a sick, churning black, the color of pure terror. He was exposed. He was ruined. He did not surrender. He screamed. It was a guttural, inhuman sound of a cornered animal. If I cannot have this world, he roared, his face contorted, then no one will before the guards could react. He lunged, not at Rhett, but at the ancient, ceremonial podium reserved for the High Lords. He slammed his one good hand onto a dark inlay in the stone. It was not a podium. It was a trigger. Rhett had been wrong. Kaelor had one more weapon. It was not a bomb. It was a note, a single, subsonic frequency broadcast from hidden emitters in the arches of the concourse. It was a sound so low it could not be heard, only felt. It was the precise, resonant frequency of the spire's ancient, crystalline superstructure. It was designed to shatter the palace. The marble floor beneath their feet did not shake. It split. A fissure cracked open, racing from Kaelor's podium toward the dais. The great crystalline ceiling groaned, and a spiderweb of cracks appeared, raining dust on the screaming nobles. The entire outer wall of the grand concourse, the section with the observation balcony, where Rhett and Seraphine had sat, tore away from the spire with a sound like a mountain breaking in half. It peeled outward, exposing the hall to the roaring winds of the stratosphere, 100 kilometers above the clouds. Nobles were screaming, sliding across the tilting floor toward the new, gaping abyss. Kaelor Draith, caught in the tremor, was the first to go. He shrieked as the floor vanished beneath him, and he was hurled into the silver-blue emptiness, a traitor consumed by his own final act of treason. Rhett grabbed Seraphine as the dais buckled, pulling her back from the edge of the fissure. The subsonic cannon was still active. The spire was tearing itself apart. Rhett, Seraphine cried, her biography a frantic starburst of terror. The core you have to? No time, Rhett shouted over the roar of the wind and the tearing metal. The core is stable, but that frequency is localized. We have to stop it here. He looked at her, his eyes blazing with a terrifying, brilliant idea. We did it in the core. We do it again. Now. Here, she yelled. In public. They are looking for a miracle. Your Majesty, Rhett yelled back, his grin manic. Let's give them one. He grabbed her hand. She did not hesitate. She grabbed his back, her grip like steel. They did not need the alcoves. They did not need the interface. They were already linked. Find me! He shouted. He closed his eyes, ignored the wind, the screams, the falling debris. He found his own silver, C-sharp resonance. He pushed. She met him instantly. Her golden, fluid biography slammed into his frequency. This time, there was no hesitation, no fear. It was a perfect, willing, desperate union. It was not a small, internal adjustment. A pillar of pure, blinding light erupted from their joined hands. It was not white. It was a swirling, incandescent braid of silver and gold. It shot upward, a solid column of impossible energy, striking the fractured crystalline ceiling. The light sang. It was the song of the Corleones, focused, amplified, and broadcast by the two living keys. It was a harmony so pure, so powerful, that it canceled the subsonic weapon. The destructive, shattering vibration stopped instantly. The sound of tearing metal ceased. The spire, which had been in its death throes, groaned, shifted, and then held. The fissure stopped widening. The hall was saved. The pillar of light did not vanish. It pulsed, a steady, brilliant beacon. And it was not just visible in the hall. The light, the unified signal of silver and gold, punched through the crystalline ceiling and tore through the Helian jamming net. On the lower terraces, in the hanging cities, on the trade stations below, 5 million Aureli, who had been huddled in terror, looked up. They saw the jamming net, the purple storm, ripped open, and in the heart of that storm, they saw two lights, a silver star and a golden sun, merge into a single, blazing beacon above the palace. Their faith, which had been shattered, was reborn. It did not shift. It crystallized. In the grand concourse, the surviving nobles stared, their biographs a uniform, stunned, awestruck white. The conservative faction was not just defeated. It was converted. Rhett and Seraphine stood in the eye of the storm, their hands locked, the light pouring from them. Only Director Valerius was not awed. He was incandescent with fury. He had lost. His saboteur was dead. His political trap had failed. His assassination attempt had been turned into a miracle. He opened a private channel to his flagship, his face a mask of pure hatred. He wants to be a god, fine. Let him face one. All ships, Ion Storm Protocol. Target the Corleones. Target the Architect. Overwhelm the core. Burn it. Burn it all. Rhett felt it before he saw it. The pure, steady harmony of the Corleones, which had been thrumming through him, suddenly shrieked. He looked up through the hole in the wall, past the beacon of their own light. A new star had been born, a bolt of pure, concentrated ion energy. A river of white fire had streaked from the Helian fleet. It was not a chaotic wave. It was a focused planet-killing lance, and it was aimed directly at the heart of the spire. It struck the Corleones. The feedback was absolute. The pillar of light above them vanished, the beacon collapsing as the core recoiled. Rhett was thrown to his knees, his link to Seraphine the only thing keeping him conscious. The spire, its new heart under direct assault, began to fall. Rhett knew, with the cold clarity of an architect, what was happening. The core was being overloaded. The Helian fleet was pouring raw, unfiltered stellar energy into the array. In 10 seconds, the Corleones would melt, The Aegis would fail. The spire would drop. He was the lightning rod. He was still linked. He had two choices. He could break the link, sever his connection, save himself. The core would melt, and the spire would be destroyed. But he would live, or he could hold the link. He could absorb the entire ion attack. He could channel it, ground it, and become the fuse that was designed to blow. He would save the spire, but the energy required would vaporize his consciousness. He felt Seraphine's hands on him. She was on her knees in front of him, her face ashen, her biography a frantic, terrified static. She could feel his pain, his dilemma, through their fading link. "Rhett, let go!" she screamed, her voice breaking. "It will kill you. Let it go." He looked at her, his vision graying, the sound of the ion assault, a physical weight crushing his chest. "If I let go," he gasped, "the spire falls." "I do not care," she cried, tears streaming down her face, her hands clutching his tunic. "Do you hear me? I do not care. If I have to choose between the throne and the person I choose." Rhett stared at her. He saw the Empress who had been so terrified of her own emotions, now willing to sacrifice her entire world for him. The cold, burning rage that had lived in his heart for 3 years, the Odyssey, the ghosts of his team. The face of Valerius did not fade. It focused. It became a single, perfect, cold point of light. He looked at Seraphine, and in the midst of the agony, he smiled. It was a tired, pained, terrible smile. "That is the difference between us, Your Majesty," he whispered. "I am going to choose both." He shoved her back, breaking her grip. "Hold on." He did not just hold the link. He opened it. He stood up, his arms wide, and he welcomed the storm. The full, screaming, universe-ending torrent of the Helian ion attack poured into him. His vision went white, his nerves evaporated. But he was not just Rhett Calder. He was a resonant architect. He needed a baseline. He needed an anchor, a harmonic ground to filter the impossible energy. A normal mind would shatter. So he used He took the single, coldest, hardest thing in his memory, the memory of the Odyssey exploding against the black, the rage, the grief, the burning, bottomless vow of revenge. He took that trauma and he tuned it. He used his own pain frequency as a grounding rod. He caught the ion storm. He passed it through the filter of his own grief. And he transformed the chaotic, destructive energy into pure, focused, usable power. The overload pouring into the Corleones stopped. The spire stopped falling. The Corleones, instead of melting, flared. It consumed the energy. It stabilized and it sang. Its power, fueled by the enemy's own attack, surged from 15% to 60%. A wave of pure, stabilizing harmony, the song of the unified array blasted outward. It was not a weapon. It was a statement. It was the sound of a world healing, the Helian jamming net, hit by the powerful, unexpected backwash, overloaded. Consoles exploded on a dozen Helian ships. The net collapsed. Above the echelon spire, the sky was, for the first time in a week, clear. In the grand concourse, the wind was gone. The hall was stable. The silence was absolute. Rhett Calder stood for a single, impossible second. The architect had won. The rage was, for a moment, quiet. He looked at Seraphine. And then, his eyes rolled back, and he crumpled to the marble floor, unconscious. A wisp of smoke rising from his clenched fists. He did not wake. He rebooted. His consciousness was a shipwreck, shattered timber, floating on a cold, black, silent sea. The overload from the Helian ion cannon had not just knocked him out. It had scoured his nerves, burned out his harmonic signature, and left him adrift. He was the Odyssey disaster relived. A catastrophic failure. A man reduced to static. He was cold. Then, a light. It was not a light he saw, but one he felt. It was a frequency. A steady, warm, complex harmony of gold and rose. It was not loud. It was persistent. It pushed against the cold static of his mind. A gentle, insistent pressure. It was a baseline. A carrier wave. A signal searching for a receiver. He felt it wrap around the fragmented pieces of his awareness, a harmonic shepherd gathering a lost flock. It was the rhythm he had taught her, the 30-second cycle of the array. But it was no longer just the array. It was overlaid with a new, complex, biological signature. It was her. He was in the dark, and Seraphine Kaida was singing him home. For 2 days, he had not moved. He lay in the Imperial Medical Bay, a ghost in a machine. The Aurelian doctors, with all their advanced science, were useless. They could heal flesh, but they could not repair a frequency. His vital signs were a thread, a whisper. Seraphine had not left the room. She sat in a simple chair beside his bed, her hand locked with his. The physicians had tried to make her leave, to rest. She had looked at them, her biography a blade of cold fire, and they had retreated. She was not waiting. She was working. She was exhausted. Her biography a pale, flickering gold. But she held the link. She did not know the science of it, not as he did. She only knew the feel of it. She had felt him break, felt his signal shatter as he absorbed the storm. And when he fell, she had grabbed that fading, fractured signal and refused to let it go. She was doing what he had taught her. She was breathing. She matched her own steady, vital harmonic, the biographic light of the Aurelian throne, to the faint, dying static of his. She was not asking. She was transmitting. She was pouring her own life, her own resonance into his burned-out circuits. She was, in the simplest terms, phase healing him. By day 3, she felt the change. His signal, which had been a chaotic, arrhythmic noise, suddenly listened. It found her carrier wave. It was locked. Rhett's eyes snapped open. His first breath was a gasp, a deep, shuddering intake of air. The world was too bright, the sounds too sharp. The first thing he saw, the only thing he saw, was her. Seraphine was asleep, or had been. Her head bowed onto the edge of his mattress, her hand still holding his. She looked small, exhausted, and utterly human. Her biography, which had been a pale gold, flared as she startled awake. It exploded into a chaotic, brilliant supernova of rose, gold, and azure. Relief, shock, joy. "Rhett," she breathed, her voice a dry rasp. She did not let go of his hand. "You're your signal. It is stable." He tried to speak. His throat felt like it was full of sand. He coughed, a dry, rattling sound. He looked at their joined hands. He looked at her face, pale and marked by exhaustion. He looked around the sterile, white room, at the 2 Imperial guards standing like statues by the door, and the cluster of wide-eyed Aurelian doctors near the far console. The entire, insane, catastrophic weight of the last few days settled on him. The ion storm, the overload, the pain. He saw the look on her face, a look of profound, terrified relief. He found his voice. It was rough. "Your Majesty," he rasped, forcing a small, tired smile. "Next time, if you just need to share some heat or a hug, you really only have to ask." He coughed again. "Going into controlled resonant overload to get my attention seems a little dramatic." A beat of stunned silence filled the room. The doctors stared. The guards did not move. But the captain's helmet tilted, and then Seraphine, who had been holding her breath, let it out in a sound that was half sob, half laugh. It was a sharp, undignified, beautiful sound. The Imperial Guard captain made a noise that sounded suspiciously like a snort. One of the younger doctors covered his mouth, his shoulders shaking. The tension that had held the spire captive for weeks did not just break. It evaporated. Seraphine's biograph, the chaotic supernova, settled. It became a pure, deep, embarrassed rose. For the first time, Rhett saw a true blush rise on her actual skin, a faint crimson that met the light of her biography. You are an insufferable man, Master Architect, she said, finally letting go of his hand to wipe her eyes. So I have been told, Your Majesty, he murmured, and let himself fall back into the pillows. His consciousness finally, fully, home. While he had been rebuilding his mind, Seraphine had been rebuilding her world. The battle in the Grand Concourse had been the fulcrum. The moment the combined light of silver and gold had flared, the conservative faction had not just been defeated. It had been evangelized. They had seen their traitorous leader consumed, and they had seen their Empress and the human perform an act of literal, divine power. Kaelor Draith had not died in the fall. The lower-level safety nets, damaged but functional, had caught him. He was found by the Imperial Guard in the wreckage of a loading bay, his bones broken, his biography a black hole of defeated rage. He was imprisoned in the deepest cells of the spire. The evidence Rhett had uncovered, the data logs, the Helion comm packet, the energy signature of the breacher charges, was broadcast on all channels. It was sent to every hanging station, every trade post, every neutral system in the sector. The Helion Directorate's reputation was shattered. They were not just corporate predators, they were terrorists and saboteurs, exposed by their own arrogance. The embargo, which had been a stranglehold, became a joke. Neutral systems, seeing the treachery, instantly sided with the Aurelian Empire. Trade ships, laden with supplies and energy, began to flood the system, eager to curry favor with the newly stabilized and clearly powerful throne. The Spire's economy, on the brink of collapse, rebounded in less than 24 hours. Director Valerius and the Helion fleet, their jamming net destroyed and their internal allies gone, had simply vanished. They had gone dark, retreating into deep space, their mission an absolute, public failure. But Seraphine knew this was not a complete victory. It was a reprieve. On the second day of Rhett's recovery, she stood before the council. The Grand Concourse was still scarred, the great hole in its side now covered by a shimmering golden force field, a testament to the new power of the Corleones. She did not stand on the dais. She stood on the floor, among the nobles, her voice clear and without amplification. I will not speak of victory, she said, her biography a calm, steady indigo. I will speak of failure, my failure. The hall was silent. For years, she continued, I ruled from a place of fear. I was afraid of our past, and afraid of our future. I used my anger as a shield, and my isolation as armor, and in doing so, I created the very weakness our enemies sought to exploit. The Helion Directorate did not attack a strong, unified empire. They attacked a fractured court, led by a lonely, frightened woman. She looked at the faces of the nobles, who were now staring at her with a new, raw respect. The Directorate fed on my fear, the purest watch, she said, her voice hardening. Fed on my isolation. They convinced us that our heritage, the Aegis array, was a relic to be worshipped, not a machine to be understood. They used our reverence as a tool of control. They kept us ignorant. They kept us weak. She turned, pointing to the glowing Corleones schematic that Rhett had left on the display. That ends today. The age of secrecy is over. The miracle that saved us was not magic. It was science. It was true. It was a partnership, buried by our own pride. She announced the immediate dissolution of the Purist Watch. She announced the arrest of Kaylor Draith and 30 of his co-conspirators. "And I announce," she said, her voice ringing, "the formation of a new Aegis Stewardship Council. Knowledge of Array will no longer be the property of the throne. It will be the people's property. We will open the archives. We will teach resonance. We will learn, together, how to maintain our home. We will never be weak again." When Rhett was finally strong enough to walk, his first request was to attend the inaugural meeting of that new council. He stood on the same floor where Seraphine had given her speech, facing a new collection of faces. There were Aurelian engineers, their biographs bright with curiosity. There were human technicians from the lower stations, their faces eager. There were even a few representatives from allied species, invited as neutral observers. Rhett projected the full, detailed schematic of the Corleonis, the lion's heart, the human Aurelian masterpiece. "Her Majesty was correct," Rhett said, his voice still a little rough, but his mechanic's confidence fully returned. "This is not a god. It is an engine, and it is the most beautifully complex, dangerously powerful engine I have ever seen." He looked at the faces. "Power like this," he continued, "locked away, hidden, does not create stability. It creates corruption. It creates men like Kaylor Draith. It creates organizations like the Helion Directorate. They are drawn to secret, hoarded power, like insects to a light." He pointed to the central core. "My ancestors, the resident architects of Terragov, made a mistake. They were scared, as were you. So they locked it. They put two keys, a human and an Aurelian, so far apart that the engine was lost for centuries. They chose secrecy over trust." He manipulated the display, pulling up the root command protocols. "We are not going to make that mistake again." He typed a command. "Root, access open. Security protocol, public end key. Authorization, Stewardship Council, Alpha." He was open sourcing, the heart of the Echelon Spire. "The ultimate security," Rhett said, "is not a lock. It is transparent. Checks and balances. From now on, this council will manage the core Leonis, his health, power. Operation will all be public record. No one person, not even the Empress, not even me, can ever control it alone again." He was dismantling the throne's absolute power. He was ending the very concept of a holy relic. He was, in effect, finishing the job he had started. He was not just fixing the spire. He was fixing the system. He was also, unintentionally, fanning the flames of the biggest rumor in the spire's history. The Beacon of Two Lights, as the public had dubbed it, was not just a military victory. It was a romance. The story was everywhere. The human architect and the lonely Empress. Their hands joined, their souls linked, saving the world in a pillar of silver and gold. It was the perfect story. The marriage of the stars was discussed in every market. The celestial union was debated on every comm channel. It was, as Valerius had suggested, the logical, political solution. A marriage would not just bind two people, it would bind two species, solidifying the ancient alliance. Seraphine, who in her private observatory, read the political projections. A marriage to the savior of the spire would unify her people, secure her throne for 100 years, and send an unbreakable message to the Helion Directorate. She closed the report. She thought of the cold, pragmatic logic of Valerius. She thought of Kaylor's desperate, hungry ambition. A political marriage was their logic. It was a transaction. Then she thought of Rhett, his hand in hers, his steady voice in the dark, guiding her breath. She thought of his stupid, terrible, wonderful joke in the medical bay. She wanted, for the first time in her life, to make a choice that was not political. She wanted to choose as Seraphine, not as the Empress. And that, she found, was a far more terrifying prospect than facing the Helian fleet. She remained silent on the rumors. The Spire and Rhett would have to wait. Rhett, for his part, was unaware of the romantic fervor he had caused. He was back in his true home, the Archive of Echoes. It was no longer a tomb. It was a hub of activity. Engineers and historians, Aurelian and human, were working side by side, translating the ancient files, rediscovering the lost science of the Terragov partnership. Rhett was working late, cross-referencing the Corleonis power logs with the ancient star charts. The Spire was healthy, thrumming with a new, clean power. The rage that had driven him for 3 years, the cold vow of revenge for the Odyssey. It was quiet. It was not gone, but it was no longer a storm. It was just a scar. He was about to log off when a console in the deep archive, a station that had been dark for centuries, suddenly chimed. It was not an alarm. It was a single, pure note. Rhett walked over to it. The screen was black, save for a single, complex waveform. It was not a message. It was a frequency, a resonant signal, broadcast from within the archive itself. It was a key. Rhett put his hand on the console. His architect's sense tingled. This was not Aurelian. This was Terragov. It was a signal he inherently understood. It was not a message. It was a summons. The waveform pulsed, and a single line of text appeared beneath it, in the long-dead language of the first architects. The alliance was broken. The archive holds the oath. Await the shepherd's moon. Await the dimming. Rhett stared at the screen. The dim moon of Thalassa Prime, a small, distant moon, whose orbit brought it into the planet's shadow only once every 2 standard years. A time of astrological significance to the Aureli. A time of precise, astronomical alignment. He had fixed the engine. He had exposed the traitors. He had helped save the Spire. He had assumed the story was over. The signal from the dark console, a voice from his own distant past, told him the true story had not even begun. The shepherd's moon was no moon at all. It was a small, captured planetesimal in a long, eccentric orbit. And for 3 days, it would pass through the deepest part of Thalassa Prime's immense shadow. The dimming, as the ancient text had called it. Rhett Calder stood in the new, bustling archive of echoes, watching the alignment on the main stellar display. The ancient console in the deep archive had been silent since its one-word summons. But he had felt the change in the Spire's harmonics. A new layer of the array was waking up, a circuit that had been dormant for millennia. He knew he could not go alone. The array, he now understood, was an instrument for 2. He found Seraphine in her private observatory. She was not looking at the political reports or the economic projections, which were all glowing with triumphant, golden data. She was looking at the stars. Her biography, a calm, thoughtful indigo. "It is time, Your Majesty," Rhett said from the doorway. She turned. She did not need to ask. She, too, had felt the subtle shift in the Corleonis, the new, deep hum beneath the floor. The summons, from your ancestors. From our ancestors, I think, Rhett said, holding out his hand. The console in the archive is not waiting for me. It is waiting for us. She looked at his hand. It was the calloused, scarred hand of a mechanic. But she knew it was also the hand of an architect. She put her hand on him. Then let us not keep them waiting. They walked past the bustling main floor of the archive, where Aurelian and human engineers argued cheerfully over harmonic translations. They went to the deep archive, to the silent, dark console that had summoned him. Rhett looked at the wall behind it. It was a seamless, dark, crystalline surface. "It is here." The console screen was black, save for two glowing, recessed impressions. One was the sigil of the Terragov Architect Program. The other was the crest of the Aurelian throne. "The two keys," Seraphine murmured. "The two keys, together," Rhett said. "The lock is not just about genetics. The old schematic said the core Leonis required biologically compatible signatures. I think this one requires intentionally compatible signatures. It is not a lock. It is a test. To see if we have learned to trust each other." He placed his right hand in the architect's impression. Seraphine placed her left hand in the royal crest. For a moment, nothing happened. "Well," Rhett said, "this is awkward. Maybe I should have brought a wrench." "Hush, architect," Seraphine whispered. "Just listen." She closed her eyes. He did the same. He did not push his resonance. He just was. He let his steady silver frequency exist. Beside him, he felt her do the same, her golden, fluid biography settling into a calm, steady state. They were not merging. They were simply standing, side by side, in perfect, quiet trust. There was a soft click, a sound like a single, massive tumbler falling into place. The black crystalline wall in front of them dissolved. It did not slide or retract. It simply became transparent, the molecules unlatching, and then faded into nothing, revealing a small, dark, circular chamber that had not seen light in 10,000 years. In the center, on a single pedestal, was a glowing crystal matrix. They entered, their hands still linked. As they approached, the crystal flared, and a holographic recording, ancient and tinged with static, flickered to life. Two figures appeared. One was a human, a man, his face lined with exhaustion, wearing the archaic, high-collared uniform of the Terragov Architect Program. The other was an Aurelian, a male. His biography, a faint, flickering blue, his robes torn and scorched. They were not in a palace. They were in the cramped, metal-walled cabin of a starship, the whine of failing engines in the background. "This is Architect Theron," the human said, his voice rough. "If you are seeing this, then the worst has happened. The Helian Directorate, our government, the human government of Terragov has fallen." Rhett's blood went cold. "It is a rot," Theron continued, his voice thick with grief and rage. "A corporate political entity that believes all technology, all resonance, is a tool for control. They are hunting us. They have twisted our science. They have shattered our worlds." The Aurelian spoke, his voice a low, pained thrum. "And they hunt my people, the first Aurelian settlers. They see our biology, our biographic resonance, as a resource to be harvested." He looked at the human. "We are the last. We are running, but we will build one. Final refuge." The hologram shifted, showing a schematic of Thalassa Prime. "Not a palace," Theron said. "A fortress, a sanctuary, the Aegis Array. We will hide it in the clouds of this world, powered by its gravity, invisible to their sensors." Rhett and Seraphine stared, the implications washing over them. The spire was no monument to Aurelian ancestors. It was a bunker. "But a lock is not enough," the ancient Aurelian said. "The Directorate will find it. One day, the lock must be alive. It must be a promise." Architect Theron looked directly at his Aurelian companion. "Our two peoples must be one. We will braid our futures, The Corleones will be the heart, and it will require both our bloodlines to restart." He then looked directly at the camera, his gaze seeming to penetrate the millennia. "And we will braid our biology. The alliance will be sealed. A micro-fragment of the architect's compatible resonant code will be imprinted into the royal bloodline. It is undetectable. It is safe. But it will ensure that one day, an architect and a ruler will be compatible on a level they cannot even understand. A biological recognition. A pull." The two figures in the hologram faded, their images dissolving into static. Rhett and Seraphine stood in the dark, the silence of the chamber absolute. Rhett finally turned, his mind reeling. He looked at Seraphine, not as an empress, but as a biological miracle. "The biograph," he breathed, the pieces falling into place. "Your ability to phase with me. Your biography is not just Aurelian. It has a human accent." Seraphine's hand went to her arm, her eyes wide with a dawning, shocking realization. "The first day," she whispered, "in the observation lounge, when I sat next to you." "You were cold," Rhett said, finishing her thought. "I was cold," she confirmed. "But it was not just that. My body recognizes you. It was searching for your frequency. It knew, before I did, that you were compatible." The innocent question, is this how humans share heat, had been the most profound, unconscious test in galactic history. It was no gesture of naivety. It was a genetic echo, a 10,000-year-old alliance reaching out, asking, "Are you the one?" Rhett felt a laugh, a dry, shocked sound, rise in his chest. All this time, Kalor, Valerius, the embargo were all just noise. The real story was a lock waiting for its keys. The holographic crystal on the pedestal chimed, its light shifting. The recording was gone. It now displayed a simple, elegant text. It was the Old Covenant. It was not a long, political document. It was a simple, ethical oath. 1. Technology is a tool. It must never be a master. 2. Life, in all its forms, is the only circuit that matters. 3. A network. To be strong, must be shared. A secret is a weakness. A lock is a failure. 4. All power must be held to account. All systems must be transparent. It was the moral code of the first architects. It was the antithesis of the Helian Directorate. As they read it, the crystal chimed again. A final protocol appeared at the bottom of the text. Rhythm call protocol enabled. Activate sector-wide resonance. Network YN. Rhett stared at the prompt. He traced the pathways on his datapad. The Corleones was not just a power source for the Spire. It was a transmitter. The rhythm call would awaken a dormant network in every hanging station, every trade post, every colony in the entire sector. It was a weapon. It was the off switch for the entire Helian Directorate. He could seize control of their systems, their ships, their very power cores. This was it. The revenge he had bled for, the justice for the Odyssey, the power to destroy Valerius and everything he had built, all in one, clean, digital execution. Seraphine watched him. Her biography was a calm, steady gold. She knew what he was feeling. She could see the ghosts in his eyes. She could feel the old, cold rage thrumming in his signal. She did not speak. She did not move. This was not her choice. It was the architect's. Rhett raised his hand, his fingers hovering over the glowing Y. He saw the Odyssey exploding. He saw Valerius's icy smile in the concourse. He saw his team, their faces clear as day, screaming in the vacuum. Justice. Then, he heard Seraphine's voice in his memory, screaming at him as the ion storm hit. I choose the person. He looked at the covenant. A secret is a weakness. All power must be held to account. His hand, which had been clenched into a fist, slowly relaxed. A slow smile, the first truly light-hearted smile he had shown, touched his lips. The problem with a weapon, he said, his voice quiet, is that you have to hold it. And I am so very tired of holding things. He looked at Seraphine. The Directorate's sickness is not just their greed. It is their control, their secrecy. The only way to beat them is to not become them. His fingers moved, but not to the Y. He typed a new command. Command broadcast. Target all stations, all ships. Packet Old Covenant, TXT. Packet Aegis Core, schematic, open source. Execute. He did not activate the weapon. He gave the key to everyone. He open-sourced the Aegis array. He sent the Covenant, the ethical treaty, to every terminal in the sector. He was not seizing power. He was dismantling it. He was giving every oppressed station, every world choked by the Directorate, the tool and the reason to free themselves. Seraphine's biograph exploded into a blaze of pure, awestruck, golden light. It was the brightest he had ever seen. "You are," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "a much better man than your ancestors." Rhett called her. "I am just a mechanic, Your Majesty," he said, turning from the console. "I am just fixing the plumbing, on a slightly larger scale." The Spire was, for the first time in its history, truly free. Weeks later, the Grand Concourse was fully repaired. The hole in the wall was gone, replaced by a single, perfect sheet of transparent crystal that offered an unbroken view of Thalassa Prime. The balcony, rebuilt and reinforced, was open to the stratospheric wind. Seraphine had formally established the Aurelion Alliance, a coalition of free stations, all now running variants of the open-source Aegis code. The Helion Directorate, faced with 1,000 simultaneous rebellions, was in a full, chaotic retreat. Rhett was in his old workshop, which was now a glorious, chaotic hybrid of human and Aurelian tech. He was humming, elbow deep in what looked like a cross between a coffee maker and a small fusion reactor. "They are deadlocked in the Stewardship Council," Seraphine said from the doorway. She was dressed in a simple, practical tunic. "Good," Rhett said, not looking up. "Deadlock is healthy. It means no one is getting their way too easily." "What is it this time? Thermal diffusion in the lower conduits." "Subharmonic convergence in the trade sector," she said. "They miss their royal architect." Rhett paused. He pulled his arm out of the machine. "Royal architect, huh, sounds static." "Huh, sounds. The title is official," she said. Her biography a polite, professional indigo. "If you want it, it comes with certain considerations." He finally looked at her, arching a greasy eyebrow. "Considerations. Full autonomy," she said, reciting the terms. "Unrestricted travel rights to any Alliance station. You come and go as you please. You will be a consultant, not a courtier. Your voice will be heard, but your time will be your own." Rhett looked around the workshop. He looked at the half-finished machine. "It is a very good offer. Very generous," he sighed. "But I just got a signal from the Eridani station. Their water recyclers are completely out of phase. Their plumbing is a disaster. It is a 2-week job, at least." A smile, small and brilliant, touched Seraphine's lips. "The royal architect can, I assume, manage his own schedule, even if it involves interstellar plumbing." He grinned, wiping his hand on a rag. "In that case, Your Majesty, I accept." That night, the stars were sharp and cold. The repaired balcony was empty. Rhett leaned on the railing, the wind cold on his face. The rage was gone. The ghosts were quiet. He heard her approach. She wore a simple, warm cloak. She stood beside him, not speaking, and they watched the silver-blue clouds churn, 10,000 kilometers below. The wind howled, a clean, cold sound. It was freezing. After a long moment, she slid over. It was not a question. It was not an accident. It was a deliberate, comfortable, and deeply familiar gesture. Her shoulder, arm, and thigh pressed firmly against his. The shared warmth was immediate, a small, shared defiant act against the cold of the void. He turned his head. She was already looking at him, her face inches from his. Her biography was a soft, swirling galaxy of rose and gold, and her eyes were full of a gentle, knowing humor. "Is this?" she whispered, the words a perfect echo of their beginning. "How humans share heat." Rhett felt a smile spread across his face, a real one, warm and easy. He leaned into the contact just a little. "Not exactly," he whispered, "but it will do." Her biography flared, a silent, brilliant laugh, his own silver resonance. The frequency she now knew as well as her own seemed to glow faintly in the air around him, a visible aura only she could see. The two lights, her gold and his silver, swirled together, a small, perfect galaxy, and held. On the new star map in the council chamber, the echelon spire was a beacon, and all around it, stretching out into the dark, dozens of other lights, once red with directorate control, were turning to Alliance Gold, one by one. The network was awake. The song was free.